Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video. And in this one, I'm going to be going over should you or should you not consider maining a Retribution Paladin when it comes to Shadowlands. And I'm doing my best to get this for all of the specializations. We're going to talk through some of the strengths, some of the amazing mechanics that are returning to specializations, unique builds, returning flavor that's coming back to specs in general, competitiveness as well, in determining whether or not a specialization is a safe pick. Are you going to be on the spectrum where everybody's like, hey, Ret Pal, and I'm not going to invite you? Or are you, middle of the pack, maybe towards the top end, even potentially for some specializations to get invited to certain content? For me personally, Retribution Paladin is looking like a spec that I borderline want to main. I've been playing it a ton in the pre-patch, as you've probably seen, and I've been testing it more and more in Shadowlands, and it has been tough for me to make decisions when it comes to things like Covenants, because I'm uncertain, as many of you are, in whether or not something is going to be nerfed, changed, or reworked potentially. However, it seems like the buffs and nerfs and the changes are slowing down with each beta build, and those come out every Wednesday, and I cover them here on the channel. So if you're not already subscribed and you want to stay up to date with everything that's changing, make sure that you are subscribed. But for Ret Paladin specifically, having Wake of Ashes, which was a Legion ability, return baseline for its AoE and just general holy power generation was fantastic. I love to see this ability returned baseline specifically. And one of my favorite effects from Legion coming back in the form of a legendary, which is the Divine Storm one, where when you cast Divine Storm, it will project an image of that Divine Storm, and also it just increases the damage of your Divine Storm. Was an effect that I really loved in Legion, and Ret Paladin in Legion didn't have as much utility as Ret Paladin in Shadowlands currently has. With Sacrifice coming back baseline, you'll have access to a damage reduction cooldown for an ally in dungeon, raid, or more likely importantly in PvP. But in general, I really think that they've kind of nailed Ret Paladin as you could, without bringing back maybe potentially empowered seals or something. I know a lot of Ret Paladins really enjoyed that gameplay from Warlords of Draenor. Aside from bringing that back, it seems like it's got a lot of flavor returned, really cool effects, and in PvP, it's performing insanely well. In PvE and Mythic Plus, you're middle of the pack. In Raid, you're going to be good on AoE fights, but specifically Raid you're not fantastic. To take that into consideration, you're probably going to dodge a lot of nerfs when it comes to PvE. I don't think you're in an absolutely abysmal, terrible spot as Ret Paladin to the point where you wouldn't get invited to a group. And with things like auras returning to Retribution Paladins, Devotion Aura for a raid-wide 3% damage reduction, or Concentration Aura for a 30% shorter interrupt or silence effect to the group. These are things that only the Paladin can bring to a group and will likely get you invited, albeit maybe if a Holy Paladin ends up being a higher priority, they may come into the mix. I've personally been enjoying things like Final Reckoning, getting access to a big nuke on the ground that just empowers all of your holy damage. That's going to synergize insanely well with the Divine Storm legendary, which I'll get into my build in a little bit here in the video, what I'm going to specifically be going after when it comes to Covenants, when it comes to regards to soulbinds and legendaries. So if you're confused by all that and you don't know what to do in terms of making a decision, I'm going to run you through what I'm going to do. This may change, and I'll do my best to update with information, assuming that these conduits, again, it's still in beta, but it's 3 weeks away. I feel like it's unlikely that we see a massive swing on these conduits specifically. And overall, my goal with the build of the Ret Paladin is that I want something that's competitive and fun. So I want to be able to perform well in PvP, and I also want to be able to get into PvE, right? I don't want to pick something that's not going to work at all in PvE specifically, which there are some legendaries that will only really be useful in PvP. And even in PvP, they're not really that great, so you may want to avoid them, and I'll be talking about those ones specifically as well. But to me, the Ret Paladin is kind of a blender spec. You're just going to be tossing out tons of AoE damage, spinning around with lots of utility, tons of off healing, super support role. It's basically everything that I would want from hybrid DPS. Arguably in PvP, it's a bit overtuned, and that's about the only place I see maybe getting some PvP specific nerfs. Hopefully it's not hit too dramatically hard, because overall I think that they've done a great job with everything that comes to Ret Paladin when it moves into Shadowlands. But let's take a look at the conduits. So you can already tell specifically that I've picked Kyrian, and this will grant you Divine Toll, which will be a 1-minute cooldown. You instantly cast Holy Shock. In our case, because we're Ret, we'll cast Judgment on up to 5 targets within 30 yards based on your current specialization. This is going to amplify the damage further of your Divine Storm hit by all those targets. That's going to be really good in dungeons with this build specifically. Really good AoE cleave damage in PvP, and more specifically in PvP, the synergy with Lawbringer. Judgment now applies Lawbringer to the target, and casting Judgment causes all enemies with Lawbringer to suffer up to 5% of their maximum health. This is going to synergize insanely well with my first conduit that I'm going to be going after, Ringing Clarity. Divine Toll has a 40% chance to cast 3 extra times on the main target. So if I've targeting one down, Divine Toll, this percent chance will go up as I level this conduit up. And also the added benefit of going for this conduit first is that it'll work for other specs of Paladin. If you wanted to off spec for anything, if you needed to be a healer, you'll still be able to get Divine Toll's benefit from this conduit. But specifically in PvP, getting this effect with Lawbringer is an insane amount of burst. I feel like it's on the fringe where it probably will get nerfed. I'm not sure how they're going to do it to nerf it specifically. And if they did, it may fall off pretty heavily, which is why in another video, I'm going to be going over a Night Fae build for Ret Paladin, because I think Night Fae is also a really good substitute. But at this current time, Divine Toll and the synergy with Lawbringer is so much damage in PvP, where my main focus is, as well as the build with Divine Toll providing AoE damage benefits. After you judge a target, your next Holy Spender does more damage to it. So buffing my Divine Storm, I really like that feel overall in the game, and I think that I can make it competitive. Moving further into Endurance Conduits, I've personally valued the Word of Glory Endurance Conduit over the others. The cooldown reduction on your Divine Shield is just not really enough. If it ever was, it probably would be overpowered. But Word of Glory is just such a massive heal. In PvP specifically, that getting an extra shield on top of that Word of Glory is probably so overkill that they're going to nerf it, but right now it had to have been my go-to for endurance. And when we move down to the second potency, we see a returning effect similar to the seals from way back, old school Paladin days. So now when you judge a target, it will grant you Virtuous Command for 6 seconds, which causes your Templar's Verdict, Crusader Strike, Blade of Justice, and auto attacks to deal 40% additional holy damage. I'm curious if they'll ever add Divine Storm to this. It's probably on purpose that Divine Storm isn't included on this because of the legendary. It would just be double tapping into the double tapped Divine Storm. But for single target, this is going to be a massive boost of damage. And it's a conduit that, no matter what legendary you really go for, I think it's still going to be good, whereas some other legendaries kind of demand that you pick a conduit to go with them. For example, when we take a look at the legendaries here, we're going to have a lot based on Templar's Verdict. And if you do decide to go for one of these legendaries, you're likely going to want to double dip with Templar's Verdict conduits. So this one specifically, Final Verdict, and this is the legendary that I see a lot of Ret Paladins running, replaces Templar's Verdict with Final Verdict, a devastating strike that deals 1817 holy damage and has a 15% chance to activate Hammer of Wrath and reset its cooldown. Myself personally, it's really single target oriented. I don't think Hammer of Wrath is the most spectacular. It's nice to get it as a holy power builder, but in PvE, I can't help but feel Divine Storm is going to come out ahead. And right now, I feel like playing into Ret's strength, which is its AoE, is better than playing into its single target. But I can see why people are taking this in PvP, because it's really straightforward. You just get more Templar's Verdict damage. And then if you were to run this legendary, you would want to run the Templar's Verdict conduit instead of the Virtuous Command, which now Templar's Verdict has a 30% chance to strike again for 60% of its damage. And I've also decided to go Pelagos, because Pelagos grants you an insane amount of mastery with Divine Toll, which is just going to, again, buff your Divine Storm by a massive amount. This entire build is just about the spin Divine Storm build, cleaving tons of damage. Going to be really good in my mind in Mythic Plus, or at least a lot of fun. And then also in PvP, you're going to get a lot of cleave damage, very similar to how Legion was in that version of Ret Paladin. I really liked, at least in terms of its damage output. Pelagos got nerfed on its final tier slightly, but it's still great. You just get extra versatility. So mastery and versatility from this is really nice just for throughput. You could choose to run to Mechanicos for some PvP specific stuff like stun reduction duration, or stunning targets when you dip low health. This would be like a counter rogue mage build, but aside from that, I don't think you're going to really want to lose how much damage Pelagos has. Clea received a pretty massive buff recently, where you and your nearby allies' critical strikes grant you stacks of Valiant Strikes up to 40. If a nearby ally drops below 50%, you consume these stacks to heal them for 1% of their maximum health. So you get to 40 stacks, it's 40% heal. It's making these rows a little bit more situational, but Pelagos was the most straightforward. You're going to have to unlock Renown. It's going to be a little bit until you even have access to these things. So Pelagos was just straightforward and simple to understand, which is why I decided to go with it. And it works really well with the Conduits and with the legendaries that I was specifically going for, which is the Divine Storm legendary. Some other ones that are contenders, anything to do with Hammer of Wrath is likely going to be better for you if you're a Venthyr Retribution Paladin. I purchased some of them, but unless you're a Venthyr, you're not really able to utilize Hammer of Wrath too much. And I personally didn't like Venthyr Ret Paladin at all. This Echo of Eonar one has been it was crap, and then it got buffed, and then it got nerfed, and then I'm not sure where this one's going to end up, but just reading the tooltip makes me think that it's a little bit nuts. So I had my eyes on it, but not so much as I did on that Divine Storm one, just because I loved the effect, and I think with the build that I've come up with, it's going to enable it and be a lot of fun in all the content: Torghast, Raid, Mythic Plus, and PvP. And again, with the Divine Toll Covenant ability and the synergies there, I think that I'm going to do huge damage in PvP too. But this is like a utility one. Your spells and abilities have a low chance to summon a spiritual familiar to your side, increasing your damage by 10%, healing by 10%, or damage reduction by 10% for 10 seconds based on your roll. This effect is duplicated on 3 allies, 50% effectiveness, preferring allies with the same roll. So I was wondering if there was ever a time where maybe even in Mythic Plus, probably not. I don't think the damage benefit from stacking this on like your entire group, or in PvP, maybe you would have to really stack it a lot, but my eyes were on it a bit. And then this one specifically, Uther's Sanctuary, this is one where I feel like it's only going to be good in PvP. I believe it is the PvP legendary, but it's not even going to be great in PvP. If you're prot, it's insane, but for Ret, your Blessing of Freedom, Blessing of Sacrifice, and Blessing of Protection cooldowns are reduced by 1 second per holy power spent, and that could be up to 5 seconds off of a full spent holy power tree, or 3 obviously for your main spenders. You do generate holy power a lot. If they added Sanctuary to this from your honor talents, now we're talking maybe in PvP. And Sanctuary is an honor talent, which gets you out of stuns and fears, 45-second cooldown. Then this PvP legendary would jump up in terms of value in PvP, but at the moment I just don't see it having any value in any part of the game. And then a lot of the other legendaries I just kind of ignored. In my mind, it's coming down to Templar's Verdict legendary, which will require that Conduit build I was talking about, or this Divine Storm build for just massive cleave damage, and then the Divine Toll double dipping into Lawbringer. And that's sort of my run through for my build. I hope that it was straightforward. That was the main purpose of this, was that this is really confusing. There's a ton of stuff on the screen. They're giving you a ton of legendaries, a ton of things you need to make a choice that you're not really going to be able to go back on after you've invested and upgraded certain things. So I looked at what was Ret Paladin getting, or getting returned to it, that I really liked in the past, that I could also enable and amplify to have a lot of fun while also retaining some of the most competitive parts of the game. So this is kind of my Kyrian Retribution Paladin Divine Storm build. As you may have heard me say earlier, I think Night Fae is a great option as well, but as it currently stands with how Divine Toll synergizes with Lawbringer, I can't feel like Night Fae is going to compete. It's just too much single target burst damage with this current Covenant. As I say that, I feel like that's also likely to draw big attention to it being nerfed, but I still think it's a lot of fun getting the AoE Judgment to buff your Divine Storm, and then get the duplicated Divine Storm for AoE damage on trash pulls or just in PvP in general. It's a lot of cleave damage. So Ret Paladin, in my mind, you've got good unique raid utility through auras. You've got great cooldowns as well for your group. You've got good support and off healing, nice AoE damage in PvE, great single target burst in PvP, good AoE cleave damage in PvP. You pretty much have everything. The only thing you're lacking is mobility, and even mobility you can start to make up with this conduit, the Finesse Conduit Lights Barding. Divine Steed's duration is increased by 50%, and of course you can run the talent to get 2 Divine Steeds, and that one will go up to a 100%, so double duration on your Divine Steed. So even your mobility is potentially not going to be hindered anymore in Retribution Paladin. And like I said, in my mind, it's got everything returned to it and more. Outside of like that Empowered Seals build, the old school Empowered Seals build, I feel like they did a really good job with Retribution Paladin. I've been having a lot of fun with it, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to play it as an alt. So I just wanted to run you through the build that I'm going for Retribution Paladin, and then give you my own recommendation of the specialization specifically if you're curious or interested in playing it. Other than that, if you enjoyed the video, please leave it with a like. Comment down below with any questions you have, and I will do my best to answer them. I love reading the comments down below on every single video. And aside from that, check out some of my other videos if you're having still a difficult time figuring out what you want to play. It is my goal to have this channel be a resource of information and knowledge to help us all make the right decision when it comes to our gameplay in Shadowlands, because there is a whole heck a lot of choice, and it's stressing even me out. So let's lower the stress. We don't need more stress in the world right now. Anyways, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.